Salutations, fellow readers, writers, and killers of time on YouTube. My name is Martha Jones, and before October escapes me and the Halloween season is gone for another year, I would like to use the androgynous sounds of my voice to share with you a few words about Frankenstein. Actually, truth be told, I'd rather talk about the monster and leave Frankenstein out of it, but in fiction, as in life, sometimes we have to put up with a rotten parent so we can spend time with their terrific kid. Mary Shelley wrote Frankenstein when she was a teenager and published it in 1818 at age 20, the rat fink. And although the novel is an imaginative expression of anxieties of the day regarding mankind's perceived trespasses into the domain of God, the character and settings were not ones that Shelley made up out of whole cloth. There really was a Frankenstein castle, portions of which are still standing in Germany, and its master was supposedly a weirdo who dabbled in alchemy. Alchemy, in case you're curious, is one of those words that I thought I knew what it meant for a long time, and then somebody asked me what it meant. So I looked it up, and it turns out that in addition to the transformation of base metals into gold, alchemists also had a keen interest in finding a cure-all for disease and the means of indefinitely prolonging life. Behold, a theme! Also, while it's pretty much taken as gospel that Shelley modeled her monster on Lord Byron, based on what we know of Byron and his relationship to Percy and Mary Shelley, and as someone who has written some of my own dearest friends into roles as my fictional monsters, I personally can't help but think that the Lord Byron thing may have been a joke. Like Mary Shelley's all, hey, like my monster, do you, huh? I based on you. And Lord Byron's all, my, but the soul of wit must sell for cheap. Frankenstein was a pretty formative read for me, and for the most part, I only have two gripes with it. One is that Shelley used the word benevolent about a dozen times too many. Seriously, benevolent is definitely my nomination for the Frankenstein drinking game, and readers who never ever intend to be liver donors. And the book is told in first person from Frankenstein's point of view. Don't get me wrong, the monster is good people and totally worth putting up with his whiny, immature dad for, but you gotta muscle through a lot of Frankenstein to get to the monster. The 1910 film is actually one of my favorite adaptations and reflects the book in ways that movies after the 1931 classic seldom do. Like in this film and the book, Frankenstein is at college when he begins his experiments. There's not a particularly strong motivation for the doctor in the 1910 film. In the book, he was pretty tight with his mom, but his mom died and the grief drove him to his obsession with life and death. But I feel like the carelessness with which frat boy Frankenstein cooks up a walking abomination in the kitchen of his dorm kinda works for the character. You could totally see this guy writing home and being all, Dear Dad, spring break was lame. I now possess the key to unlocking the secret of immortality. Home next weekend to do laundry. Victor. Which very nearly happens in this very old Thomas Edison version of Frankenstein. And I was totally going to make fun of Frankenstein for signing his last name in a letter to his beloved. Then I remembered in the book they address each other as cousin. I can deal with banjo music, but it's not my favorite, says Thomas Edison in the making of this film. In the 1931 Universal movie, Frankenstein is an established doctor who seemingly gets obsessed with the conquest of death for the same reason that Sir Edmund Hillary became obsessed with the conquest of Everest. Like, it's there. It's right there. Why would the universe have put it right there if it didn't want me to mess with it? Insert masturbation joke here. Or here. Let's give the doctor a little modesty that he would not be inclined to give himself. The monster in the book is not conjured by throwing ingredients into a crockpot, as in the 1910 version. But Shelley's actually pretty vague on the details of the assembly of the monster. She mentions through the doctor that in order to collect the parts for his creature, he visited slaughterhouses and graveyards, but I don't think he animated the parts with the help of electricity. Also in the movie they mention something about the color and light that you can't see, which makes a body think that the 1931 people cribbed some notes from a completely different sci-fi author. But the quintessential Frankenstein that we associate with big arcing diodes and scientific doodads was not a thing in the book. Shelley makes mention of the instruments of life and the spark of being, but I think she means spark in a metaphorical sense. The tiny little spark that leads to the conflagration thereafter. Because he's working through the night on his project, and he catches that first twitch of the monster come to life by dying candlelight. Not the kind of thing you'd expect from a high-tech laboratory. To me, that suggests that the 1931 classic might have been as much a work of legitimate science fiction as the book, because the first electronic defibrillation would not occur until 1947. First successful limb attachment would not occur until 1962. It took something like 150 years for science and medicine to catch up to the imagination of this one science fiction writer. Take that, Jules Verne. Just kidding, submarines and rockets are fine. I can't imagine anybody causing trouble with those. I also really love that in Frankenstein 1910 there's this random skeleton in the chair. I get that it's probably just lazy set dressing, but I'm fond of the idea that it might be leftovers from either this experiment or an earlier experiment that failed. In a similar vein, the book monster and Edison's monster are both born brilliant, not childlike as he was when Boris Karloff played him, which leads me to wonder if maybe the doctor contributed something genetic to this creature. Sperm, blood, hair, fingernails. because a non-zero number of IRL doctors in Common Era have found something that so consumed their psyche and the idea that it could work that they end up incorporating themselves in an experiment because they fail to get the support of their peers. My favorite example of this, without looking anything up, was actually Jack Kevorkian, who, in addition to his other controversial beliefs, looked around at the perennial blood shortages and said, why can't we transfuse the dead? The blood would be super useful, they're not using it, an idea which led to a resounding ew from the medical community. So the doctor experimented on himself, and it did work. Of course, Dr. Kevorkian may or may not have gotten consent for all that stuff he did. Dr. Frankenstein distinctly did not get consent from the dead before he went to work on them, which kind of makes me wonder why they bothered to make the monster so childlike in 1931. Don't get me wrong, I think Boris Karloff is the dude, and he's acting his socks off in this role. But whether the monster is brilliant like he was in the book, or simple like he was in the 1931 movie, the monster can scarcely help being more sympathetic than his master, if for no other reason than that he didn't sign up for any of this. Dr. Frankenstein, on the other hand, generally brings the monster to life, immediately regrets it, then ignores the monster and hopes it goes away while it attempts to work out its abandonment issues in Murder Town. The two exceptions I can name are Young Frankenstein, where the father-son relationship is played for laughs, and the incredibly unclassic Van Helsing, which is an indisputably terrible movie on the whole, but it is one of the few in which both monster and creator are sympathetic. Dr. Frankenstein is only there to bring the monster to life and get killed, but when Dracula tells Frankenstein his plans for the monster, Frankenstein's first instinct is to protect his creation. Also, the confrontation at the windmill is reframed as kind of a Quasimodo versus the mob thing, and I kind of love it. I'm glad I lived long enough to appreciate that movie. If I had died in my 20s, I would have died thinking it was a very silly movie. So, for reasons of audience relatability, we end up with a childlike monster in the 1931 Frankenstein. The 1910 monster was not sympathetic or childlike, or even a monster. The Edison monster seems to be a metaphorical monster who gets conquered by love and disappears in a puff of smoke, which I thought was a pretty stupid ending. Then I remembered the ending of the 1931 Frankenstein, and I hated the 1910 Frankenstein ending way less. After the legendary windmill scene in Frankenstein 1931, we got a dead monster and a happy doctor taking breakfast in bed, basking in the glow of a pregnant wife. As someone who spent a lot of years as a barnacle on the bastardly backside of the beast that is the medical biz, this ending strikes me as a distressingly apt metaphor for privilege, specifically that of privileged, wealthy doctors. Because Frankenstein is the bored son of a wealthy baron with nothing to do but get in trouble, and his actions make him indirectly responsible for multiple deaths. He feels kind of bad, maybe, but at the bitter end he faces no consequences. To use a modern idiom, it didn't even slow down his golf game. I don't believe I have the wherewithal to delve into the Hammer Horror series of Frankensteins. But credit where credit is due, they show concern for the monster's soul, which I don't think you see in the Universal pictures. And the people Frankenstein wrongs remember the bastard's name. He is not crowd-surfed back to his father's castle, there is no breakfast in bed. Frankenstein is disgraced, and in order to proceed to do his evil deeds in the sequels, he has to change his name and go into hiding. Not so at Universal. This was not a no-harm, no-foul situation. You let him get away with murder. Don't be surprised if this shit happens again. As always, thank you for giving these videos a shot. Plan A was to do this whole thing as a live stream, wherein we would watch the 1910 version together and I would yap at you about the stuff I read and researched. But I chickened out because edited me is way more charming, and I don't actually have the bandwidth here. If for some reason you abide in mad and wild desperation to do a live stream with me, let me know in the comments and I will do my best to make it happen. Meantime, take it easy. Love you. Bye.
Like my channel, buy my crap, doo-dah, doo-dah. There's no time to take a nap, oh the doo-dah day. Hey!
It's alive. And it's mighty chatty.